Buongiorno a tutti, come state? Io faccio il primo video del mio nuovo corso Italian for Improvers. So this is an 8-week course. Everyone who's seeing this, or most people who are seeing this video, will have attended my first lesson, which took place on Monday this week. Grazie mille di essere venuti. So it's really nice to meet your acquaintance. And today we're just going to look at Il Passato Prossimo. So hopefully you remember that this is one of the Italian past tenses. So there's a few different types, and this is a very important one. So in English there are two very frequently used past tenses. One is sort of like a simple past, if you like. That's when you just use a pronoun and a past participle to tell someone what's happened in the past tense. So for example, I started, I worked, I finished, I went, I spoke, that kind of thing. So you just use the pronoun, for example, I, or we, or they, or you, etc., plus the past participle. Finished, worked, helped. Generally in English the past participle has an ed at the end. That's sort of the regular one. However, there are lots of irregular past participles, so it doesn't always follow that rule. In Italian it's sort of similar. Past participles are easier to spot, so I've written an example sentence here and there's a past participle in it. So guardiamo insieme. Ho pagato il conto. Dov'è il participio passato nella frase? Dov'è? Where is the past participle, il participio passato, in the phrase, in the sentence? Qui. Pagato. Pagato. So, seeing as most of you watching this will have some Italian knowledge already, you probably recognise that that comes from the are verb. Pagare. Pagare. To pay. Ecco un altro, here's another example. Ho parlato con Michele. Qui c'è il participio passato. That's the past participle and it comes from the verb parlare, to speak. Parlato is the past participle of the verb parlare. So let's have a look at these sort of next to each other if you like. Parlato, pagato. What do you have in front? You have hopefully something very familiar. Ho parlato, ho pagato. I paid, or I have paid. So these two examples show you how you form the Italian past tense, and they're sort of in the io form, talking about something I have done. So let's have a little look on the board. Andiamo un po' più vicino così. So you have to excuse me, I do this, sort of play around with the focus and the zoom and stuff. So in those examples we have ho, and we have, say, I'll say parlato. Ho parlato. So what we actually have here are two different elements of this tense. We have this, which comes from the present tense of the verb avere, I have. Tu hai, you have. Lui, lei ha. Noi abbiamo. Voi avete. Loro hanno. So you can use, depending on who you're talking about or who you're addressing, who you're describing, this form of the verb avere will agree, if you like, with the pronoun that comes before it. So here it's agreeing with the person speaking, io. Ho parlato. So as well as having avere in the present tense, we also need a past participle. You take the verb, so whatever you have done, you have spoken, or you have eaten, or you have drunk, or you have visited. Whatever the verb is in Italian, find it and change it into the past participle. So to do that you'll need to know how you change a full verb into the past participle. So this is the first part, this is the second, but in order to use the second part, you need to recognise a verb. So, avere plus a past participle. Let's use a new page to show you what regular past participles look like in Italian. And this you can find on pagina 2. Sì, ecco. Usiamo gli stessi esempi. We're going to use the same examples actually as those on page 2 of your handout. So, parlare, this is an ARE verb. Nice, regular, probably one of the first verbs you learn. This is its past participle. Parlato. That looks familiar, doesn't it? Ato at the end, because it's an ARE verb. So, to create the past participle, you simply take off the ending of the verb and you add a-ti-o. Okay, that's not too hard. Here is a slightly different verb, ripetere. Okay, so this is an ERE verb, that's the ending, E-R-E. So we're going to change that into the past participle. This means to repeat. To repeat. So the past participle will sort of translate into English as repeated. Ripet. What happens with ERE verbs? You might think that it would be eto at the end because it's an ERE verb, but that's actually not what happens. It's a UTO. Ripetuto. Parlato, ripetuto. So this is for regular verbs. However, in Italian there are loads of irregular ERE verbs. For example, leggere. In the past tense you would say letto. To read becomes read. Leggere, letto. Scrivere. To write. It isn't scrivuto, even though you'd think it might be. It's scritto. So these are regular verbs. There are exceptions. So let's think of another verb that works in a similar way. The verb vendere. Vendere. Che significa vendere? Do you know what that one means? V-E-N-D-E-R-E. I promised myself I wouldn't spell anything out without writing it down, so let's see again. V-E-N-D-E-R-E. Ho venduto la mia casa. Ho venduto la mia casa. Vendere is to sell. So in the past tense or the past participle, you would take off the ERE and you would add uto. Uto. And then, if you want to say I sold or I have sold, you just pop in the present tense of avere. Ho venduto, and then you can add whatever it is you sold. La mia casa. Che significa? Ho venduto la mia casa. I sold my house. See, if you want to make it negative, I have not sold my house. That's right, you just put non in front of the first verb. Non ho venduto la mia casa. Che peccato. What a shame. So that's another ERE verb, which follows the regular format. So we've seen ARE verbs, we've seen ERE verbs. You just take off the ending and add uto. Lastly, IRE verbs. So, as you will see on page 2 of your handout, IRE verbs like capire, which means to understand, change to capito. So they have ito at the end. So it's the last 3 letters that change on a past participle. You need to take off or remove the ending, which is always going to be the last 3 letters, and then that will leave the stem of the verb. So these bits here are the stem or the root of the verb, and these are the endings, and then these are the new endings that you replace the previous endings with in order to form the past participle. So there's lots of grammar words here: root, past participle, endings, etc., verbs. but you'll get used to them, and they're really helpful in the long term because it helps you look at language and approach it from a sort of mathematical, strategic point of view. It helps you to see the patterns that form and how you can manipulate those patterns to be creative and express yourself. So it's quite exciting stuff. So bearing in mind what I said on the first page, so you need avere in the present tense. You need it to be the right version of avere, the right conjugation. So if we're saying we have done something, we would use abbiamo. Just looking for the best pen to use. Let's try the black one again. Abbiamo. Okay, so we've got abbiamo. Now, we're going to use the verb ripetere, okay, because that's one of our examples. So, ripetere is an ERE verb. Let me just write down the stem of the verb. Ripete. That's the stem, because if it had ERE at the end, it would be the whole infinitive verb. Abbiamo ripetere non ha senso, doesn't make sense. Abbiamo ripet. We just add the little past participle ending for ERE verbs. Abbiamo ripetuto. Che cosa? Che cosa abbiamo ripetuto? Abbiamo ripetuto la frase in italiano. Sì, we have repeated the phrase or the sentence in Italian. We have repeated, we repeated. Now, it is worth pointing out, as I said in lessons, there are two ways that you can translate this passato prossimo tense in English. So, for example, ho parlato, ecco l'esempio, let's look at the same example as at the beginning. Just looking at the time. Ho parlato con Michele. In English, you could translate this correctly either by saying, I have spoken, or I have spoken with Michele. So that's like the most literally sort of word for word the same structure wise. I have spoken with Michele. I have spoken with Michele, yes. Sì, ho parlato con Michele, sì. However, you can also translate this correctly in English as I spoke with Michele. Yesterday I spoke with Michele. Yesterday, when you say yesterday I have spoken with Michele, it sounds a little bit strange. You don't need to really put the yesterday in if you say I have spoken with someone. I spoke with him yesterday. So there's a differentiation between these two sort of past. The simple past, I spoke, pronoun plus just the past participle, and this one, which is a little bit more similar to the Italian, I have spoken with Michele. Anyway, the fact that there are two ways of saying it in English and one way in Italian actually makes it easier for you, because you need to just remember how to form this passato prossimo, and then that will suffice for translating either the I have spoken or the I spoke. We repeated or we have repeated, whatever you've repeated. So let's do a last example with an IRE verb. So we're going to use the same one, capire. We're going to change the subject, the person we're talking about in the sentence. So let's have a think. We're going to use lui, lei. So we're using the third person singular. Io, tu, lui, lei. 1, 2, 3, third person singular. Io, tu, lui, lei, they're all singular because they're talking about one person. So we need the verb avere in the third person, which is a. A. And then we need the past participle of capire. So here's the stem of the verb cap. Capire. So what do we do with IRE verbs to make it a past participle like these? Capito. Sì, ha capito. He or she has understood. He or she understood. So, molto bene, okay. There's one more thing I need to mention. I did mention this in class. So lots and lots of verbs use avere as their sort of auxiliary verb. So there's two parts to this passato prossimo. There's an auxiliary verb, that's the helper verb, the first one that you use in the structure. Then there's the past participle, and so that's what we call a compound tense when it's made up of two parts or two or more parts. Uno, due. So these verbs, these ones here, all take avere, avere, avere. However, there are other verbs which take essere, okay? So we're not going to look at them in this class. We'll probably encounter a few in the next week or so. You'll certainly see a few. But if you want to find some examples of that on your sheet, then you can look at esercizio 1, exercise 1, and you can look at letters G and H. So G and H, qui. For example, sono stata in Italia. I've been to Italy. Sono nata in Italia. So it's a bit more complicated when the verb takes essere, but for now, this is the main thing to be wary of for next lesson. So we're going to see lots of this. You need to know your verb avere, and you need to know your past participles, or at least recognise them. Don't worry if they look irregular, lots of them are, you'll get used to them. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to do for homework is to look at these past participles, these are regular ones, and figure out what the infinitive, what the long full version of the verb is, and what it means in English. Other than that, please feel free to look through the handout. Ci sono 4 pagine, there's 4 pages there. Lots of stuff to keep you going until next week. I'm going to send this off to my students now and say goodbye, and ci vediamo la settimana prossima. Grazie. Ciao.